Hello and welcome to Channel 2S. I'm your host, Second Soundwave, and even though we're at the Gunpla workbench today we're not going to be looking at model kits. Today we're looking at action figures. Now, one of the things that's always interested me about action figures that are targeted at collectors is how Western companies and Japanese companies kind of do them a little bit differently. So with Japanese companies, they tend to go all out. They make these super crazy detailed, really nicely painted, wildly, insanely articulated figures, just absolutely insane looking. Robot Damashis, Figmas, SH Figure Arts, they do these crazy, incredible looking figures, and then usually they're like $60, $80, sometimes a bit more if there's some kind of weird exclusive thing. But then Western companies do it a little bit differently. I guess because there's not as much of a collector market in the US, or maybe because they have to sell them at like normal department stores like Target and Walmart, they kind of have a different set of priorities for the figures. Instead of going all out for the collector market, they kind of try to find a balance between kids' toy and adult collectible. And what this usually results in is like $20 to $30-ish figures that have decent articulation, pretty good sculpting, alright paintwork, but are still usually of characters that fans would be interested in. I'm talking about stuff like Star Wars Black Series, Marvel Legends, Transformers Generations. Those kind of action figure lines are really popular nowadays, so of course I've always thought about what it would be like if there was a Gundam action figure line in that style. Something not as fancy as Robot Spirits, something with more modern design elements to it than MS in Action, something almost exactly like Gundam Universe. Now, Gundam Universe is a brand new figure line by Tamashii Nations, but unlike their Robot Spirits line and their other high-end collectible lines, this is pretty much directly targeted at the exact market that I was talking about earlier. This is basically a Western-style action figure of the Gundam. And not only did I bring the Gundam here to show you today, I brought the entire first wave. So this is Gundam Universe Wave 1. They're starting out the line with the RX-78, the Unicorn Gundam, and the Wing Gundam, and that's probably about the best they could do to start this line off with. This line is targeted towards international audiences, so you can't not have the Wing Gundam in the original lineup. The RX-78 is of course the Gundam, the absolute legend itself, and the Unicorn Gundam is basically the mascot of all things modern Gundam. So no complaints here about the starting assortment, although it would be kinda nice to have seen more than 3 figures to start the line out with. However, we do have at least 6 more figures confirmed for the line, so hopefully it continues on. But anyways guys, I've had these figures boxed up in my room for a couple days now, and I'm just itching to dig into these and see what the figures are really like. So let's stop wasting time and actually crack open these boxes. Although before we do that, since this is a brand new line, I would kinda like to give you a little bit of a box tour as well. So the packaging for these figures is right in line with what you would see with any kind of Western action figure line. You got the big clear bubble window so you can see the figure. You got a little tab on the top with a hole through it so you can hang them up on peg walls like American stores love to do. And right below the window that shows us what the actual figure looks like is some insanely awesome box art. You guys know I'm an absolute box art fanatic, and the box art on these Gundam Universe figures gets the Second Soundwave seal of approval. And speaking of seal of approval, I've also noticed that Tamashii Nations has this little holographic sticker they put on their figures now. I guess they got tired of the rampant bootleg problem with higher end action figures and decided to do something about it. However, with the Gundam Universe line, I don't know if they really needed these. I don't think this is really the type of thing that a Chinese company would bother bootlegging. The side of the box is where we actually see a little bit of that Japanese figure line design aesthetic bleeding through, where we have a numbered series for the figures, which isn't really something you see a lot in Western lines. That's kind of a Japanese thing. So it's kind of interesting to see the two design philosophies blending together like this. Other side of the box, we got the unit number again and a picture of the figure. And then the back of the box is almost completely written in English. As you're looking down here, you're mostly just looking at English text telling you all about the figure until you get to the very bottom where there's some technical information that's covered up by a Bluefin distribution sticker. We got a call out for Gundam info, we got an advertisement for the other figures in the wave. It basically looks like everything you would expect to see on a Western style figure box. And lastly, I'm just going to give you a nice little look at the box art for the other 2 figures in the line, because all 3 of them look really cool, and if you want to see these pictures even better, there are high-res versions of them available online, so if you want to dig around for these, you can certainly find them. But I've personally had enough of looking at boxes. I want to crack these things open and see what they're really like. So if you want to pick up any of these figures for yourself, you can find them at channel sponsor New Type HQ. New Type HQ mostly focuses on the Gunpla side of the Gundam franchise with all sorts of model kits, paints, and supplies to choose from. However, they do have the Gundam Universe figures as well. So check them out, the link in the description below, and if you do decide to pick something up, definitely remember to use code Channel2S for 10% off your whole order. So with the boxes open and the sponsorship plug completed, there's really only one guy we can start with, and that's the RX-78 Granddaddy Gundam himself. And honestly, I'm blown away by these figures. This is everything I could have ever hoped a Gundam action figure could be. The plastic they use for these figures feels incredibly durable. It's got a little bit of flex to it. I don't see this thing breaking ever. The only thing on this entire figure that feels even a little bit fragile is the V-fin, and that's because it's made out of a slightly harder plastic. The rest of this figure though, I literally feel like I could chuck this thing down the stairs and it would be fine. The paintwork on it is not as bad as I was expecting at all. The edges of all the painted areas seem to be very sharp and clean. I'm not noticing any overspray or paint dribbles or anything like that. There are a lot of panel lines sculpted in that aren't painted that I'm sure a lot of you guys are itching to line in. I'm personally not really bothered by it though, because again, this isn't a model kit. This is a toy. This is a nice Gundam toy. I really like the styling of this figure as well. It's a nice take on the RX-78. I know we've seen a lot of different redesigns of this particular Gundam, but I feel like this is a nice, good, kind of cool looking RX-78. And you get a really nice spread of accessories with this figure too. You can probably already see I've got some of them equipped. So he's got his beam rifle, the classic Gundam beam rifle. The scope does move, which kind of surprises me, but unsurprisingly, the handle does not. I was honestly just expecting this to be a single slab of plastic, so the fact that even the scope moves, that's kind of enough to impress me. The shield for the figure looks really nice as well. It is a bit of a different design from the Gundam shield we're used to. It's a lot thicker this way and a lot thinner this way. However, it fits the stylization of the figure nicely, and in true Gundam form, it is mounted both at the hand and at the forearm. Now, what surprised me about this figure, because I really wasn't expecting to see this at all, is it actually has alternate hands. So you get a pair of closed fists in addition to the weapon holding hands. Then you also get an attachment piece for attaching it to one of those Tamashii action stages. And you get a pair of painted beam saber blades to go with the handles on his back. Now these are not like your Gunpla blades that are molded in translucent plastic. Instead, they went for a more fluorescent look for these. And while I admit they aren't really looking that impressive on camera, when you see these in person, they actually look really similar to the way the beam saber effects looked in the original show. They actually capture the look of the classic UC beam effects surprisingly well. And while I haven't tested this out yet, I believe you can also stick one of these into the barrel of the rifle. And I just confirmed that is in fact the case. So as for gimmicks and features with this figure, there really isn't a whole hell of a lot. You can take out the beam saber blades and put them in his hands. Now, the weird thing about the hands on this kit is you don't actually get a saber holding hand for the right hand side, so you have to use the gun hand, which means his fingers always going to be sticking out a little bit, and it also sometimes doesn't grip the saber super well. Some positions it holds it fine, others not so much. You can also take the shield and attach it onto his back, which I believe is pretty standard fare for the RX-78. And that's really it. There's no core fighter, there's no fancy gimmicks of any kind. It's just a good, solid little action figure. So now we come to the burning question of Gundam Universe, and that is articulation. Because one thing that matters a lot with Japanese import figures is articulation. Japanese collectors love it when their figures can do all these crazy martial arts poses. But one thing that I've noticed from talking with Western figure collectors is they don't always care as much about articulation as long as the figure's got a good sculpt and looks like the character. So I really wasn't expecting too much from this figure going in. However, the articulation is actually surprisingly good outside of a few areas. Most of the articulation you'll see on this figure is pretty par for the course with a high-grade Gunpla. You got your head ball joint, an extremely satisfying ab crunch, a little bit of pivot at the abdomen joint, but no actual waist rotation that I can see. The shoulders don't swing out at all, but you still get a pretty nice range of movement. And the first place where I'd say the articulation really does suffer is the elbows, because that's all you get. And while these are Western style figures and I really wasn't expecting a lot out of the articulation, I think they could have gotten a little more out of the elbow there. And the same goes for the knee. It's not bad, but it could have been better. The skirt armor on these figures moves similarly to what you'd see on a robot Tamashii, so there's plenty of hip mobility here. He's even got the thigh rotation, which I honestly wasn't expecting to see at all. And then finally, we have a very, very impressive double ball-jointed ankle that gets you a lot of mobility. Oh, and I guess I should also mention there's a bicep swivel and a ball joint at the wrist. But the best thing about posing the Gundam Universe RX-78 is you can just manhandle the hell out of this thing as you're posing it and not worry about anything breaking or falling off. There's something so incredibly satisfying about having a Gundam that you can just pick up and pose and never have any real worry of something breaking or coming off. You don't have to worry about chipping paint. You don't have to worry about breaking things. You can just have fun and go to town. It's a great feeling, and it's one that I've been craving for a long time. So the RX-78 here, it's already a win in my book. I think I could use a little more elbow and knee articulation, but other than that, I pretty much love everything about this figure. But now I kind of want to see how the rest of his wave mates stack up. So let's take a look at Wing and Unicorn. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the other two figures in the wave because most of what I said about the RX-78 can really be applied to all of these. The Wing Gundam has pretty much the same articulation as the RX-78, although I think it feels like it has a little bit more elbow movement. Everything else is the same though. The styling of the Wing Gundam looks great, just like with the RX-78. They took some liberties with the design. The shoulder pads are definitely a lot longer and thinner than they were in the show. The accessory loadout is very similar as well. You get a rifle holding hand, you get a normal holding hand, you get a shield, and you get a rifle. However, the one thing that I feel is missing with this figure is the beam saber. I would have liked to have seen a green-bladed beam saber for my Wing Gundam, and it kind of sucks that it's not included. But to kind of make up for the saber, of course, we do have the Wing Gundam's signature wings. Now, there is a little bit of extra articulation here. The wings are on a ball joint, so they can swing front to back, they can rotate, and then both the red and the white and gold feather are able to move independently. There does seem to be a little bit of quality control variance from figure to figure within this line, as I've noticed the Wing Gundam's joints feel just a tiny bit looser than the RX-78's, but it's the kind of production variance that I doubt really applies to every single figure in the line. If you picked up this wave yourself, you could very well have a slightly looser RX-78 and a slightly tighter Wing Gundam. That's kind of just how these type of figures are. The paintwork on the Wing Gundam I still think is really great. You've still got those bare panel lines, but everything else that you'd pretty much want on a Wing Gundam is colored in. And because the Gundam Universe line doesn't really care much about gimmicks and is more focused on just making basic figures, there is no transformation here. I know that might be a deal breaker for some, but for me, it doesn't really bother me. I've always thought the Wing Gundam's bird mode looked really dumb and only really ever put the high grade in bird mode once just to laugh at it, so no real loss in my book. And just like with the RX-78, you get a Tamashii stage adapter. And now we close out wave 1 with the Unicorn Gundam. Now the Unicorn is the first figure I've opened today that I'm not completely in love with. The Unicorn Gundam's redesign is a little bit more extreme than the others, and I was already aware of this, and I actually quite like a lot of the redesigns they did. I think the new chest looks really cool. I like the way the shoulders look, but when you look at the legs from the side, the amount that the kneecap sticks out is kind of ridiculous. I know the Unicorn's knees are supposed to protrude, but this just looks silly. So I'm not a big fan of that, and I'm also not as big a fan of how this figure feels. The joints on this one are noticeably looser than the other two, and the articulation isn't that great. In fact, when you look at the torso joint here, it barely moves at all. The rest of the articulation is pretty much the same as the other two, and actually I just discovered on this figure that all three models also have a drop-down mechanism on the hip joint that allows you to pull the leg down slightly for more mobility. Does it make much of a difference? Not really, but it is there. Another aspect of the sculpt of this kit I'm not really a fan of is that the wrists are set at a 45-degree angle, meaning that when you have the hand in naturally, he has this weird gorilla arm thing going on, and you have to really stretch the hand out to get it almost straight. And even then, you can't quite get it perfectly straight. So when you have him holding his gun, it looks incredibly weird because this is literally as straight as you can get his arm. Another kind of weird thing going on with the Unicorn is the beam tonfas. Now, I was really excited when I opened this figure and I saw that it looked like the beam saber's tonfas were actually functional. I looked in the back and I noticed there was a little hole for a beam saber blade, and I kind of tugged on them a little bit and they actually came out. However, I soon realized that there's no other place to put them. You can't mount them facing forward. So they're removable, and you can use them as normal beam saber handles. You can even use them attached to his arm with the blade sticking backwards like you see in some of the games, but you can't use them as proper beam tonfas. Fortunately though, he still does have a pair of sabers connected to his back, one of which I've already taken out and put a beam saber blade in. And interestingly enough, these are actually the exact same mold of saber handle used on the RX-78 figure. So it seems like in wave 1 we've already got a little bit of shared tooling going on. Unlike the RX-78 though, you can actually pose around the beam saber handle holders a little bit. In fact, you can actually rotate them, I believe, all the way down, just like that. Now, I don't know if this is them accommodating some of the tooling on this kit for an eventual Unicorn mode figure or what, but it's still an interesting touch. So while I am glad the Unicorn Gundam was part of the first assortment of figures, I do think this one's the easiest one to pass up on. It's got a few minor problems, and while it isn't that much worse than the other figures in the wave, it just didn't really do it for me. So to close out this video, here are all three of the Gundam Universe figures together, and there's really no three better figures than this to show that Gundam Universe really does not give a flying flip about scale. As I've reiterated many times in this video, these are Western style action figures, and generally Western stores like to have everything at these nice convenient price points where everything's the same size and price. They can just slap the same barcode on everything and sell it as an assortment. So you're not going to be seeing any kind of serious scaling going on with this line. However, this isn't something that really bothers me in the least. The purpose of these figures is just to be cool looking fun toys, and that's exactly what they are. They're robust, they're affordable, they look pretty awesome, and that's really the most I was hoping for. Now, I've avoided comparing these figures to Gunpla throughout the entire video pretty intentionally, because if you're comparing these to Gunpla, you're looking at them for the wrong reason. These are not a competitor to Gunpla. I know this is going to surprise some people, but not every piece of Gundam merchandise has to be compared to Gunpla. These are action figures. They are toys. They are not made for a Gunpla audience. And I think the fact that they aren't made for a Gunpla audience is a good thing because not everyone enjoys building Gunpla. I think these figures are a great way to appeal to Western action figure collectors. They certainly appeal to me. And I'm eagerly anticipating the future of this line. I'm going to try to go 100% on it unless they do some really crazy exclusives. And my biggest hope for this line right now is that it doesn't get canceled after 4 or 5 waves. Because the only thing this line is missing at this point is selection. A good standardized action figure line is great, but in order to really reap the benefits of having a standardized line, you gotta have a lot of figures in the line. So I can only hope that Tamashii Nations continues to support this line going into the future. But anyways, I'm your host, Second Soundwave. This has been a look at something a little bit different today. If you have interest in any of these figures, if you want to pick any of them up, go ahead and go to the link down in the description below, New Type HQ. Don't forget to use code Channel2S for 10% off your order. If you're new to Channel 2S, you want to see more Gundam and Gunpla content, be sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like if you enjoyed this video. And as always, I'm Second Soundwave, and I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.